Happy Easter. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Let's hear what God is saying to the world today from the 16th and final chapter of Mark. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there's the place they laid him. But go tell the disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. This is the word of the Lord. One of the pleasures of spending so much time at home is the act of writing the Easter sermon. In some ways, it's the most challenging sermon of the year to write, not only because the resurrection is at the heart of what it means to call oneself a Christian. It's a tricky thing to take the same story year after year after year and try to give it a new spin. And then, of course, this year, the notion of a resurrection takes on even greater meaning. So while ensconced on my couch, I decided to compare the 4 gospel accounts of the resurrection, and lo and behold, I rediscovered the Gospel of Mark and its darker tone. No alleluias here, it's fear and silence that ends his account of the life of Christ. My apologies to those of you expecting or needing Easter lilies and baby bunnies, but I have to say, Mark's Gospel of the Resurrection is perhaps most appropriate for times and these times in which we live. The setup is the same. The women head to the tomb where Jesus had been buried 3 days before. Only in Mark's Gospel are the women named: Mary Magdalene, Salome, and another Mary, the mother of James. They have come to properly anoint the body of their beloved friend, and they worry how they will move the very large stone that had been placed in front of the tomb. When they arrive, the stone had already been moved away, and the tomb is empty. A young man in a white robe, sort of like an angelic admin assistant, tells them Jesus is not available. He's gone ahead to Galilee, and they are to tell the disciples, especially Peter, to meet him there. The women are terrified, and instead of sharing the good news, they run away without telling the disciples what they've seen. Mark's gospel ends with the story hanging on this moment of failure and disappointment. And roll the credits. Except that ending apparently wasn't satisfying or glorious enough. Did the last page of Mark's gospel go missing? Did he forget to back up the hard drive? Did his dog eat it? People couldn't stand the fear-filled, silent ending. So over time, new endings were tacked on to make the story more user-friendly. Most scholars agree that this, the version I just read you, is the original ending, the one that Mark intended. It has less closure than the endings of Matthew, John, and Luke, but it does point to an aspect of the resurrection story that has gotten lost over time. The disorientation, the fearful wonder that comes when we are face to face with the unknown. Because let's face it, the resurrection is beyond our mental grasp. The COVID-19 virus has disrupted so much of our lives in this holiest of seasons. No Easter family dinners or egg hunts or pictures of your dog with the Easter bunny. Most importantly, perhaps, no church gatherings with all those people who come only once a year. Sanctuaries filled to overflowing with folks hungry to understand the good news of the gospel. And maybe, just maybe, they choose to come only once a year because they're waiting for the version of the story to which they can relate. The resurrection is powerfully disorienting when you really think about it. Mark writes that the women run away in tromos and ekstosis, trauma and ecstasy. Are they terrified because they think Jesus has risen in order to take revenge on all who let him down? Has his body been stolen? I don't know about you, but if I was expecting death and found life, I'd be discombobulated, amazed, and definitely scared. The sad truth is we have tamed Easter with our chocolate bunnies and new spring outfits. Mark's ending reminds us that the resurrection cannot be tamed. It's full of mystery and wonder, and perhaps we should live into its enigmatic secrets. Perhaps Mark is inviting us to stand with the women, staring into the empty tomb with wonder and shock. Mark is a gospel of exclamation points, full of words like amazed, astonished, and terrified. A phenomenon has come to earth, and the author is determined to capture its impact and drama. But here, at the end of the story, there's silence. Maybe Mark knew the story wasn't over yet. Again and again, those closest to Jesus just don't understand, and they fail to share the good news. Maybe Mark writes an unresolved ending in order to invite us to jump in and take up our part in continuing the story. We're to share the good news because the story is really just getting started. The fact that there's no closure in Mark's version of the resurrection is a powerful corollary to what's going on right here and right now. We don't know when the virus will go away. We don't know if we should cancel our summer vacation, if school will come back in the fall, or when we'll be able to gather in person in the church again. We're living a chapter of humankind's story that, so far anyway, doesn't have an ending. We are the ones who will be writing the conclusion, and we have to make a choice. Do we slide back into the tamed version of our existence? Or do we approach the rebuilding of our lives with a sense of wonder and a renewed commitment to sharing the good news of the gospel? I'm not talking about evangelism. I'm talking about being the living, breathing models of Christ in the world, a world of community, kindness, justice, and love of God and neighbor. If we were together, I'd have us sing the great African American spiritual, "Were You There?" And I would do so because of its final verse. Were you there when he rose up from the grave? Were you there when he rose up from the grave? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when he rose up from the grave? I don't know about you, but it sure causes me to tremble. Amen.